Andrew was the brother of Peter. He preached the gospel to many Asiatic nations. But on his arrival at Edessa, he was taken and crucified on a cross, the two ends of which were fixed transversely in the ground. Hence the derivation of the term St. Andrew's Cross.
And we're back.
Hey! Welcome back to Martyr's Row.
Welcome back. You know, it's one thing I've noticed
Yeah?
about reading about these martyrs
Okay.
is that they all died. But,
Yeah, good point.
But in sometimes some like really harsh ways.
Yeah.
And so this one in particular with Andrew,
Yeah.
we talked about him being crucified.
Yeah.
And it got me thinking. I learned this recently.
Okay.
You may already know this. 'Cause you're
We'll
smart.
see.
You're a smart little cookie.
I like being a cookie.
What kind of cookie would you be if you were a
That's
cookie?
a whole... I don't even know how to answer that.
Some kind of Myers-Briggs breakdown.
I feel like I would be a cookie that's not quite done yet.
Like a no-bake cookie?
A no-bake cookie?
Yeah.
Oh, that sounded like a brand.
Oh.
A no-bake?
A no-bake?
A no-bake?
I think that's just easy bake oven.
Yeah.
Anything that anyone's ever done.
I'm like a cookie that, like, when you flip it over, it looks different.
Actually, I could see that.
Yeah,
That makes a lot of sense.
It's like, oh, I thought this was one thing, but it's definitely something else. I think I'll have to try.
But does that mean you eat, like, the top of it
Mm-hmm.
independently?
Oh, okay.
So you gotta cut it horizontal? Is that how you eat that? Or just they both blend together? It's all part of the
No,
gumbo?
yeah, I'm thinking it's not like a layered cookie.
Oh, it just looks different.
Yeah, like they intended to have everything part of what was going on, and then they flipped it over, and there was still some stuff on the pan that got underneath the dough.
Like, oops.
Yeah. So, like, it looks like a fruit cake underneath for some reason, but on top it's like a chocolate chip cookie. I don't know.
I like where it's going.
It's like stained glass underneath.
That'd actually be kind of cool.
I know it would be. Well, you don't
Yeah.
want to eat stained glass.
No, but I think it looks cool.
Well, fruit cake kind of looks like that.
It does. There's a lot of stuff going on in there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No one
I
should eat
kind of
fruit
stay
cake.
away from those. Well, so in other news, I learned this recently, and so I was thinking about it while I was reading about Andrew,
Yeah.
and it was the word excruciate,
Okay.
because that's a pretty intense word,
Yeah.
and so that word actually is derived from the pain that's felt during crucifixion.
Oh, really?
And so I was like, oh, let me look at kind of the etymology of this word.
Yeah, because, like, did somebody from a cross
Yeah,
yell
so
out excruciate?
excruciate.
This is like how words are invented.
Yeah, it kind of is, though. So the word excruciate is derived from the pain associated with being crucified. It means to torture, torment, inflict, or very severe pain on, as if by crucifying. Kind of crazy.
Yeah.
So it's from the Latin excruciatus, past participle of excruciare.
Sometimes Latin feels like a made-up language when you read it backwards like this.
Yeah, like it's almost a word I know.
Yeah.
but not quite.
But like, sounds like you were trying to be fancy.
Trying to make a little French or
Yeah,
something. Yeah. So, and that means to torture, torment, rack, or plague. Figuratively, to afflict, harass, vex, torment. So from ex,
Those are a lot of synonyms.
out of, or thoroughly, and plus cruciare, which is cause pain or anguish to, literally, crucify. And that comes from crux, a cross.
So excruciating pain is calling back to crucifixion.
Yeah.
So
Which
it's like being crucified.
Is considered the worst way to die.
Yeah.
And so they're like, okay, so this is the worst amount of pain someone could go through is excruciating.
Mm.
because it's associated to the worst way you could possibly die.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess that's how words work.
Yeah, it's kind
Like
of
that
interesting,
actually
right?
does kind of make sense.
But when I think
Huh.
about that, it's 'cause I think we commonly go to Jesus because he's a pretty popular cross dyer.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't think anyone's wearing a cross around their neck.
No, thinking
And
of
it's referring
Andrew.
to somebody else. Yeah.
But you think it's like, oh, like Jesus wasn't
Actually,
the only
that-
person to die this way.
Right.
It doesn't diminish the pain that he went through, but it's like there are martyrs that believed in what he said so much that they were willing to go through the worst kind of pain
Mm-hmm.
to proclaim the glory and the honor that he deserves.
Yeah. That's actually a good point. And I mean, that's interesting. I feel like this
Yeah.
stuff is all layered throughout. It's like acknowledging the fact that what happened on the cross and while God incarnate was on the earth 2,000 years later influences a bunch of secular things
Yeah.
in a way that like no one really acknowledges.
Yeah, true. Because we just throw that word out sometimes.
Yeah. And that makes sense. But no, like I that's what I was trying to interrupt you because I had a thought that and I'm glad I stopped.
Trying to interrupt
I'm
you.
glad I stopped because your point was great.
Thanks.
It just made me think of like if someone's wearing a cross and it's referring to someone else that died on the cross, first of all, that's crazy.
That would be wild.
But it makes me think of like the satanic cult of upside down cross representation. The funny thing is, if they were referring to somebody else, they could be referring to Andrew and honoring Andrew.
Yeah.
But
that's
they're
true.
definitely not.
I don't think
I think that's one of those like as simple as it's ironically because they would wear it somewhat with pride.
yeah.
It's ironically
Yeah.
saying what we believe in is the
like the opposite.
Yeah, it's the false
Yeah.
version. It's the imitation version of what's real.
Yeah, which is crazy to stand by.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it also like kind of lends to that like yin and yang element.
Yeah, that's true.
Which I feel like if we had to make a bumper sticker or a t-shirt at some point, it would probably say this could be an episode.
That's half of what we say.
And it could just be that we're very early on in the
Can you
podcast.
put that on a pocket tee?
I would love to. I got to get that going.
Yeah, you
I got to
do.
get that going.
You do.
I do. Yeah, we'll put anything on a pocket tee.
You could put that on a pocket tee.
Yeah, you could. No, so that's interesting. Actually, that makes me think about a little bit something I was thinking about earlier today in cultural references. Because I was thinking about this today. So, I love The Office, which is
Classic.
like I feel like if you looked at me, you'd be like, yeah, that guy would say that. Which is like for me, that's also a thing where I'm like, then I don't really want to be the person that says that. But the truth is, I like The Office a lot.
I feel like that's such like a millennial show.
Yeah, for sure.
And so anyone who looks like a millennial, they're like, Office.
Yeah. That's a
and
good
they'd
point.
be right.
They would be correct. And I'm not like, I don't care to necessarily defend it against any other show. That's not that interesting to me. But the thing I was thinking about with The Office was cultural references and understanding full context of storylines and references where if I meet someone new and we're having a conversation, and then I end up referencing The Office without context, which is not something that I would naturally do, but they might do it or reference something like that.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden you're bonded.
Yeah, true.
And so my non-theological question in that, and maybe the question you wouldn't expect me to ask, is like, how much of that stuff do you think we should actually like pay attention to? Like, should we be aware enough of cultural context? Like, what is surrounding us in the world at the moment? Like, what is the storyline?
Yeah.
And that could include like the most popular show and what that show's premise is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's an interesting thought.
Like as a Christian in 2025, is that something that like we should think about? Like, should we be relevant to, and not relevant to the culture? Because I actually disagree with that. But should we be understanding of the cultural context in such a way where we still know the shorthand?
Yeah.
Just thinking about like Paul, you know what I mean?
I think with that, it's like, I think yes. And because like we're doing that with scripture. And so tying in, it's like, what are they talking about? What's their cultural? Because we see it in the letters of Paul. We see it all throughout scripture where they make references as like a cultural reference that they would get.
Yeah.
It's like, this is common knowledge. You guys would understand this.
Yeah.
I mean, even I'm going through Kings right now, and constantly it's like, yeah, this is already written about in the Book of Chronicles.
Yeah.
So just go read that.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I don't have to tell you. It's already written down somewhere else. Like, you get it.
Yeah, I feel like it's more like that in the Old Testament, honestly.
Especially in the Old Testament, because there's a lot of crossovers.
Yeah.
But but it's like, I feel like, yeah, we should do that because everything comes from something.
Yeah.
And so we should be aware of what we're, like, where does something come from?
But should we?
But then also that brings up the other funny side. It's like, yeah, but sometimes it's like, who cares that much?
Well, that's the thing.
And it's like, is that wrong to say?
But I also feel like that's a thing.
Oh, yeah.
Like the idea of not being engaged in something is also being engaged in a culture who's not engaged. Meaning like every group or subgroup has their thing.
Yeah.
And so like at some point, in order to like Paul says, be all things to all people in order that you might reach them. And like that's kind of one of the things that I think about in that context is like maybe there is something to keeping up with what the cultural language is so that you can speak Christ into it.
Yeah.
However, I feel like maybe the limitation is more so like, don't try and know everybody's culture.
Yeah.
Maybe just do the stuff that you're actually interested in, even though it is like secular.
Because I feel like there are those things that aren't wrong. They're just not beneficial.
Sure.
You know, and it's, I feel like there are a lot of things like that.
And I'm actually exclusively talking about non-beneficial things.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's like, it's not hurtful. It's just not beneficial.
Right.
It's like, it's just junk food, basically.
But should we delve into the non-beneficial in order to benefit some?
I think, yeah. I think so.
Yeah.
And I think the other side is like, it's good for us too.
Okay.
Like, I think it's good to have, here's my unpopular opinion maybe.
Yeah.
The way I've said it in the past is I think everyone should have a vice.
Okay.
And they're the typical ones that people think of. You can have your own opinion about that. But it's like other things where it's like, do you like watching Love is Blind or like Survivor? It's like, I think that's a vice.
It's not different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's good.
Yeah.
Because it's like you need something to help you kind of unwind.
Okay.
From stuff. It's like, studying the word is great, but if you do that 24 hours a day, every day, you're going to get worn out and you're going to get tired. And it's like, you need that time to like, let me just take a quick break and just like.
That is kind of a hot take. Because
it is a hot take.
It is, because it's like I think my natural inclination is to be like, yeah, but the truth is like, I don't know. Like, meaning it's like, should we read the word all day, every day? It's like, well, technically there are other outward functions.
Mm-hmm.
So like the answer is no. But that doesn't necessarily mean watch Love is Blind. You know what I mean? Like, it actually means like maybe go out and spend some time doing the evangelistic side of it.
Sure.
Or going, you know what I mean? Like putting it in practice.
Yeah.
So like that is the other side of it. But I feel like there is some of that where it's like, there is some of that cultural reference where to have downtime a little bit and be able to actually like, actually engage in something that you're potentially interested in.
Yeah.
I don't know, because the idea of downtime, though,
I feel
is
like
tough.
some of that goes into the idea of a Sabbath.
Okay.
Where it's like, okay, work 6 days, and then rest on the seventh day. Then it goes into the question like, well, what does rest look like?
Well, what is Sabbath for, right?
Yeah, what's for us?
It is for us, but it's a lot of it's reflection on God.
Yeah.
It's like remembering the faithfulness of God in order to refuel for the next week.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
absolutely.
So it's like, yeah, because all of the Sabbath tradition or Shabbat tradition
Yeah.
is all about reflection as a family on Scripture
Yeah.
about the faithfulness of God.
Yeah.
So that's the thing is like,
It's true.
you know, like that's not to like give free promotion over and over again to Love is Blind, but
Well, I feel like stuff like that even, it's like, we'll pick on The Office. We'll go back to that
Okay,
one.
yeah, yeah.
So we don't just harp on Love is Blind.
it seems worse
It does.
than The Office.
Somehow.
Yeah.
I think it's because there's real people involved.
But it's the vice element though.
Yeah, I think with that is like, and vice is a strong word to use. I use it on purpose because of that. But
Why though?
I think it's funny.
Well, we were talking about excruciate.
Yeah.
So why is vice strong? Or why
Well, I
can't
should
it
say
be
it
strong?
has a rough connotation when we hear it.
Yeah.
Because we kind of put it in a couple categories.
Yeah, except like Romans 1 though. Paul just names a bunch of things all together.
Mm.
And I think for some of us we would read that and be like, I don't think I would put all these things together, but he does.
Yeah, that's true.
So like
true.
I think in some ways your name is Paul, so you're allowed to do that.
Nice. That's my favorite thing.
Yeah. But I don't
I
know.
guess with that is like part of that reflection I think we can enjoy with humor. We can enjoy with like go take like a nice long walk. And it's like I think part of reflecting and enjoying the faithfulness of God and what he's done is enjoying the creation that he's made.
Yeah, true.
And that can look like, this is going to sound
Do it.
super 2025 of me. But it's like, yeah, let's just enjoy the moment. Let's embrace where we are right now.
That sounds very 70s.
Actually, yeah, you're right.
Or
It's not
60s, I
2025.
guess.
It's pretty
Yeah,
old.
yeah.
But like that idea of like, yeah, let's kind of enjoy what's around us, what God is doing,
Yeah.
and what he has done. And I think there's a lot of ways that can look. And I think kind of Vice can help us put us into that place where we can do those things.
Yeah, maybe it's like the idea of like whenever somebody is into something, they're identified as that.
Yeah.
So like there's a guy that I see that runs all the time. Like I see him run a couple times a day, like close to where I live. So it's like that guy, I'm like, oh, that guy is a runner. You know what I mean? And that's his vice.
Yeah. Yeah, it's running.
Yeah, like that's part of his vice.
Yeah.
And to some degree, like a negative vice that we would say as being negative is more so done in the dark potentially.
True.
But the truth is like if he's running instead of like watching his kids, then like that's pretty bad.
Yeah, because he's neglecting what he should be doing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, true.
So in some ways it's not necessarily what they're doing.
Yeah.
That's bad per se.
That's fair.
But that it's taking attention away from what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I mean is like if I watch a full season of The Office, but I like don't spend time in Scripture that day.
Yeah.
Or if I spend time in Scripture so that I can watch a full season of The Office. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But my question is less that and more so like I think it's beneficial to know cultural things for the people I feel called to. Maybe that's the best way to say it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like if I don't feel called to a specific community and reaching that community, like there are people that like really get into skateboarding.
Yeah.
And then they like go to skate parks in order to like build community there and tell people about Jesus. And it's one of those things where it's like, well, they keep up with skating and they intentionally keep doing it because for them, it's a way that they can, it's a tool they can use for evangelistic purposes. So like they end up just knowing cultural things about that.
Yeah, that's true.
You know what I mean? True. So like, I don't know. I'm actually not even sure what I'm asking, to be honest.
But I think I agree with it.
Okay. Yeah, because it's less so like should we stay away from something, and more so should we engage further in order to reach those people specifically in that community.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like the part where it can get sticky is how we engage sometimes.
Sure.
Where it's like, if there is something that is like just wrong, it's like, well, yeah, don't engage in that. But if there's something like learning like how to skate, it's like, yeah, I think that's great.
Yeah.
I don't see anything wrong with that.
Sure.
And part of that is learning the pro skaters that have brought it to where it is today.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, I think you should do that.
Yeah.
If I'm going to use a ridiculous example, but if someone's like, "Oh yeah, come here, this new skater thing where we just sacrifice an animal on the board," and it's like, yeah, don't do that. Don't engage in that.
We sacrifice the animal on the board.
Yeah, but you have to do it in the bowl after you drop in.
Well, yeah, because it contains the fire.
Exactly.
It's like, it makes sense.
You get it.
Yeah, I get it. It's a fire.
But it's like, yeah, don't do that.
Right.
But like, you can know it happens and be like, yeah, that's not good.
Yeah.
But we can still like do some cool tricks.
But here's the actual thing that as we're talking about this, I'm realizing that the technical context to what Paul was saying then is really like, these are the things I used to do, and I was really good at it. But then I turned and I followed Jesus. Then I turned and I realized that the unknown God is the true God.
Yeah.
And now that's all I do. So in some ways, technically, the context of what he said shouldn't necessarily be used for us to indulge in the things.
I've been tricked.
It's actually, and I feel like...
Well, so I think the bigger thing to what you said earlier, too, is like, where do we find our identity?
Yeah.
So it's like you see someone who's always running, and you're like, oh, that guy's a runner.
Right.
Where to the people that know him, like, no, that person's actually a Christian.
Yeah.
Who likes to run.
True.
Actually, I think about that with, I don't know if you're familiar with Phil Keggy.
You've asked me that.
I think I've asked you that
on this podcast.
Often. Love the guy. You should look him up. He's a great guy. Amazing guitarist. But one of the things that
Phil Keggy, if you're out there.
Thanks for listening.
Glad you're out there.
Glad you're out there. Keep doing what you're doing. But there's been several interviews with him where people ask him like, oh, what's it feel like to be such a great guitarist or to do this and that? And he's like, there are times where I give up playing guitar for months just because I feel like I'm neglecting the word.
Yeah.
And he's like, because I'd rather be known as a man of God than the greatest guitar player ever.
Yeah.
And I think that's the attitude that we should have going into those things, where it's like, yeah, I see him and it's like, he's an amazing guitarist.
Yeah.
But he's also a profound Christian.
Right.
And it's like, that should be our identity first. And it's like, we're a Christian who plays guitar.
Yeah. So all that to say, it really doesn't matter if you know about anything that's going on. Right? Okay, we all agree? 3, 2, 1.
I won't lie to you. I'm a little nervous for this one. Because I think this is the first time where you have the idea, but I have the instrument.
I honestly, at this point, I can't recall.
Oh, no.
To be honest. I think we've played like this before. Maybe we haven't.
I think so.
Okay. But you just said you thought that was the first time. So
I lied.
Okay.
I think this is the first time. I lied before when I agreed.
This could be the first time. All I have in my head is a name. But based on like how this feels, we'll see how it goes. The funny thing is, like, the people that are only listening, which is probably most people, it's like they kind of have heard a little bit already, and this probably doesn't make any sense.
Like, what is that?
Yeah. All right, so let's actually do something different.
Okay.
This time.
Yeah.
And let's go right into like just start playing and don't stop playing.
Interesting.
So
okay,
let's only play and sing. Let's not commentate in between it.
Okay, I like it.
And then just see how it goes.
Do you want
so you just start and then keep evolving. It's gonna all be emo.
Evolve there.
Yeah. You're from Ohio, I'm from Central Florida. It has to be emo.
It's so true.
So from now, just start and let it evolve, and I'll just follow you.
Okay, sweet.
So you find it, and I'll follow you. Doesn't have to be perfect.
It's not.
I'm giving you time to find it.
Yeah, I'm trying to find something interesting.
Because I liked what you were doing, but I didn't want you to like make a switch all of a sudden.
Yeah, and I was trying to think of where
Or
to
be
go.
locked in.
All right, we're commenting. We should stop.
We have a podcast because we keep talking about stuff.
So we can't stop talking.
Yeah, I know.
All right, I'm going to stay there for a minute.
Okay.
Your brother, he knew. Andrew, upon the cross, upon the cross, oh Andrew,
It's hard for me not to talk.
It's so hard. I want to talk so bad.
Was it hard for you to keep that going?
Yeah, my fingers.
Okay,
my hands
okay,
getting
yeah.
stiff, and I was like,
Let's
oh,
do
man.
something different because I want to go into like a whole storytelling of that.
That could be fun.
And I was like getting there, but I thought I want to acknowledge the fact that I just keep saying Andrew,
Andrew,
over,
your brother knew.
over and over again.
Andrew.
Andrew. I also love the idea of somebody's listening to this out loud.
They're just in public being like, what?
And somebody named Andrew is like, is someone singing my name?
I always think, because working at people's houses and stuff and job sites, I will play a podcast sometimes.
That's way out of context. No one knows what you're talking about.
Oh yeah, so I own a painting company, and so when I'm at the job site, well, sometimes we'll be listening to music.
Yeah.
We bring like a Bluetooth speaker and we'll play music.
Sure.
Sometimes we're like, hey, you guys feeling a podcast? And we'll switch to a podcast. And some of the podcasts people pull up, just like the most
that's kinda
random
fun, though.
things. But it's funny because usually whenever the weirdest podcast part is playing for any show,
Yeah.
that's when like the customer walks in. Or,
Sure,
like,
of course.
and you're like, hey, so it wasn't like this the whole time.
Yeah.
And that's when the person named Andrew be walking by.
All right, so to be fair, I'm trying to write a whole different storyline using Andrew, the Martyr, and I should probably just go back to the theme song.
That's fair. I kind of liked it though.
I know.
It's very topical.
I know. I was trying to get to that, but then I was like, well, how do
I feel like we're moving away from writing a theme for the show to just
writing
a
song?
brand new song?
Yeah,
every
I know.
time. Do you want something happier?
Yeah, go back to that slow Sweet Home Alabama. Yeah, as soon as you picked up, you were like, why does this sound familiar? It's like you're literally just playing the slowed down Sweet Home Alabama.
That's exactly what was happening. That's like, there's this YouTube video I watched a long time ago.
This sounds so familiar.
Yeah. Well, so it's funny, actually, a little callback to our previous segment.
Yeah?
this guy was like, yeah, so I was writing this song and I really liked it. It was like this really slow, like kind of interesting piece. And he's like, then I realized I just rewrote the Office theme, but at half speed. He's like, then I sped it up and I was like, it's the Office.
That's amazing.
It was so cool.
I hope he like pitched it to somebody.
Oh, that would have been amazing if
Yeah.
you did.
And they're like, wait, wait. Are you kidding me?
Actually, when I was younger, in bands, there was one guy who always would try to write songs,
Yeah.
and he had a habit of just rewriting written songs, like popular songs, but he'd have no idea. So he'd be like, hey guys, I wrote this song the other day. He'd have lyrics, everything.
You don't think he was trying to like rip it off and just like
no,
play
he
it
like,
as his own?
genuinely didn't know.
Wow.
And so it was funny because he'd be playing
That's
a
actually
song
kind of
and singing
impressive.
it, like almost perfect to the song that he heard on the radio at the grocery store, probably. And then we would pull up the song on our phone and play it. And it got to a point where you'd just be like, dang it. I did it again. And one of them was Sweet Home Alabama, actually.
But here's the thing. That's the most Ohio thing ever.
Yeah.
That you had a kid in band who would put on shows for you guys of, hey, I wrote this song last night. That's crazy.
They were like, yeah, that song's been written in a lot of people
Yeah.
know.
But the fact that y'all are just sitting around and he's like, let me play you the song I wrote last night. And it's just a rip off of a Jack Black song.
Yeah. That's Tenacious D, man.
Yeah. Oh, man. All right, let's do something.
Okay, I'm going to go a little happier this
I
time.
honestly almost forgot. It's like a whole other
I forgot
segment.
what part we were in. This whole time we just have reverb on our voice now.
We literally started this whole segment by saying, let's
We're not
just...
We went a while without it.
I know. I know we did.
Okay, here's
But it was obnoxious that we weren't saying anything.
Andrew. I should have joined you.
I think that has to be the song.
That's the pocket Tina.
Andrew. We can make a whole podcast out of this.
Here's something a little happier.
Andrew. That sounds like a drug commercial.
Andrew.
We love you, Andrew. That's awesome. I love it. Oh, okay. Oh.
That might have to be it right there.
No, because now we have to actually try and play that. Now we. That caught me off guard because I was trying to be serious for a moment, and then that made it even funnier to me. Oh my goodness!
Holy moly.
Oh, I feel like we're not even making a podcast at this point.
At least now we can be crying for the sad part.
What would be great is if we cut everything out before right now.
And it just cuts to this.
We're both like crying, laughing. Oh. All right. All right, let's take the happy Andrew from the top.
Happy Andrew.
Okay, now this song only can be that
It's
name.
It's that one.
Yeah,
now.
yeah, it has to be.
The name of the episode is Andrew.
It can't be any other. All right, here we go. Here's your theme song this
All
week.
right, here's my sloppy banjo play.
Andrew. Oh, Andrew. Oh, Andrew. Andrew. Oh, Andrew. Andrew. Oh, Andrew. 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 Welcome to Martyr's Row.
Thank you to all the Andrews.
We love you.
If your name's Andrew, comment below.
This,
We have a special surprise for you.
This episode's for you.
This is for you. I say a special surprise. We're just going to send them a link to the song.
We'll send him a shirt that says Andrew.
Andrew, yeah.
Andrew, we love you.
We love you.
I'm here for it. I love that.
Oh, he's so good.
Oh, man. All right, Paul. Well, here we are.
We are here back on Martyr's Row. I can still feel like the tears from my eyes. From
I know. I didn't expect
I was
that.
like, I think I'm probably red and puffy now. Well,
there's no way that anybody listening is going to enjoy that as much as we just did.
I don't think anyone's still here.
But to be
I think all skipped it.
to be honest though, I feel like people that will listen to this podcast will appreciate it,
I think so.
or they'll
I
zone
hope
out
so. I hope so.
and then realize that we're just going, Andrew.
And eventually they'll be like, what am I listening to?
What have I done? What did I choose today?
I need to think about my life choices here.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we'll redeem whatever doubts you had in your mind about us as we go into a very serious topic.
Or just further establish them.
Yeah. I'd prefer that, to be honest.
Well, with that said, I have a question for you.
Uh-oh. Does it involve an Andrew?
It very well could, depending on your translation.
What?
I don't think they had that name back then.
Okay.
So, you know Nimrod.
Good old Nimrod.
The old Bugs Bunny.
Was that what he called him?
Doesn't he call people Nimrods?
Oh, probably. That would make sense.
I think he's the one who started that.
He was the main one.
I think it was Mel Blanc who's just like
Mel Blanc.
Because he did the voice of Bugs Bunny.
No one knows that.
Sorry, for the one person that knows that, which is like my dad.
Someone went, "Come on!
How do you not know Mel Blanc?"
Comment below if you know Mel Blanc.
Yeah, comment. And if your name's Andrew, if your name's Andrew and you know Mel Blanc, we have a very special surprise. For
Andrew
you.
Definitely knows Mel Blanc.
Come on, Andrew.
Yeah. He doesn't want people to know that, but he does.
It's like his closet thing.
Yeah.
Secret knowledge.
Anonymously comment, Andrew, that you know who that is.
My name's Andrew, trust me. And I know. You have to take my word on that.
Anonymous.
Anonymous.
I love that. Okay.
So the biblical Nimrod. I want a whole different name with that.
Can't get Andrew out of my head.
No.
You almost said Enoch, though.
I almost did.
Yeah.
Same time frame.
Got Enoch on the mind.
Always on the mind. I feel like when I look at you, that name just comes out.
Yikes.
So Nimrod.
Enoch O'Clock.
Enoch O'Clock.
That's a t-shirt.
That's actually pretty good. I like that. Comment below if your name's Andrew, you know Mel Blanc, and you like that.
If you would pre-order that shirt.
If you pre-order that.
Oh, man.
So Nimrod.
Okay.
Now
all I'm thinking is Bugs Bunny.
Yeah, me too. Hold on, I'll bring it back.
Okay.
This is serious.
Okay.
So you know Nimrod.
Yeah, good guy.
Well,
he had his days.
So he is attributed with building the Tower of Babel.
Yes.
Do you think
Okay.
that Nimrod was a Freemason?
Ooh.
You like that?
Do I think that Nimrod was a Freemason? Okay. I feel like we set ourselves up badly.
As
just
we usually do.
In general. Because, like, my brain goes, like, where do I even go? Like, there's, like...
Andrew.
Andrew. Yeah, I don't... okay, so do I think that Nimrod was a Freemason? So, there's a lot to unpack there.
Absolutely.
So Nimrod. Okay, so Nimrod was he was said to be the he was said to be the first mighty man on the earth,
Yes.
which is confusing to me a little bit
Mm-hmm.
because of the language that's specifically used there. So, like,
It's a specific phrase to use.
yeah, and it's not right away. Like,
Yeah.
other things have happened before the Bible says that.
True.
But the other thing is Nimrod is, like, barely mentioned.
Yeah. I
It
think
go-
there's only 5 verses that mention him.
Yeah, and they're in, like, random places.
Yeah, it's I know it's Micah.
Yeah, well, Genesis
Genesis.
10
Yeah.
would be the big one.
He's Micah 5 and then
And then Chronicles somewhere.
Chronicles. That's right. Yeah.
So, like, that's the interesting thing is, like, Nimrod is, like, barely mentioned. But that goes back to what we were talking about a little bit before, is the Old Testament specifically. The New Testament does it, but the Old Testament, sometimes it nods to things, and then sometimes it just makes sure that that piece of the puzzle is in there somehow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, it does not expand on it at all.
Yeah, it's just like, there you go.
Especially, like, Genesis 1 through, like, 12
Yeah.
is, like, I mean, there are people that, I think Mike Heiser actually said he could spend the rest, well, at the time, he said he could spend the rest of his life just in Genesis 1 through 10.
I don't blame him.
Yeah. the late, great
Michael Heiser.
Michael Heiser.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, so it is interesting because in Genesis 10, it's a genealogy,
right.
and then there's like this break off where it breaks the pattern of just naming names, and it says, "This is Nimrod,"
Yeah.
and like his father's Cush,
Yes.
and then here you go. Anyway,
Right.
back to what I was saying.
Yeah, and in some ways it's really just, it's setting up for Genesis 11.
Yes.
So it's like, it is kind of setting that up because it's about to tell you the next story,
Yeah.
but it's telling you the genealogy intentionally to go like, this is where these people came from. We're about to talk about this guy's influence. But then even in Genesis 11, it doesn't really talk about Nimrod.
No, it just kind of like assumes you would know,
Yeah.
like what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Because I think what's interesting and it's important with especially the early names is it's weird to read it because it's like, oh, well, they had their son Egypt or they had their son, Canaan.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, these are all names of nations.
Yeah.
It's like, well, those are the nations they established.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I was gonna say is like that's like they call it the naming of the nations.
Yeah.
So like that
Yeah.
section is like the naming of the nations, but it is kind of jarring because if for instance if like you met my son for the first time and I was like, this is my son Canada,
Yeah.
you'd be like, what?
Yeah.
That doesn't
Yeah.
make sense.
That's weird.
But like if eventually my son's name became the name of the nation, like that's kind of wild, but also you
Yeah.
would never know that
Yeah.
because it
true.
would be far after you, or it would be,
And I think we have that today even, or at least in recent times, where I think of the city that I grew up near, Cleveland,
yeah.
is named after Cleveland.
Right.
Like that was the guy's last name.
Yeah.
Or even I was just in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and Hattiesburg is named after the guy who built the city's wife. Her name was Hattie. He's like, oh, Hattiesburg, done. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, so I guess we still do that.
Yeah.
We just don't think about it that way.
Yeah, I mean, people do that with businesses and stuff too.
Yeah.
Like that's pretty consistent. But yeah, okay. So I think the going back to just the question that you asked. So like Nimrod is typically associated with Tower of Babel. But like we said, like he's mentioned in Genesis 10. Tower of Babel, I believe, is Genesis 11. And then I think flood is
so.
Genesis 12. So
Well, flood was before.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We need to dissect that a little bit.
Yeah.
So like
It's fair.
yeah, because that's kind of a big part of it. Because like, okay, so if Nimrod's associated with Tower of Babel, what is the Tower of Babel? The Tower of Babel was the people got together and said, let's make bricks and build
Yeah.
a tower to heaven, basically.
I think to make a name for ourselves, is that
Yeah.
the language? Yeah.
Yeah. So like as they're doing that, that's like what they were like. He had established the nation that said that and did that. And so I think that's where like that connection, that makes sense, where the connection of the question of
Yeah.
is Nimrod, was he a Freemason?
Yeah.
But then it also goes back to like, well then, do we talk about Freemasonry?
Fair.
Like a little bit? Because
I feel like it's enough to explain like what is that.
yeah. Well, like when I spent some time in Israel, there's a place like over by Tel Aviv that is like right on the Mediterranean, and there was like a Knights Templar like fortress, and that particular fortress was like the one time when I was there that they talked about the Knights Templar a lot. And Freemasonry, I think, to outsiders of Freemasonry, always associate the beginning of it with the Knights Templar,
Yeah.
or at least I did.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Or like King Solomon, one of the two. I feel like are the
yeah. Which would have been like yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But even I feel like
that
even
might
Solomon
just be
is
because
loose.
that might just be because of National Treasure.
Knights Templar.
Yeah. And because I think when they introduced it in the first one, I think they talk about King Solomon, and they also talk about the Knights Templar.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know a ton about Freemasonry, but that, I mean, that goes back to like the cultural reference concept. Is like the truth is like that would be how I would know.
Yeah.
Is National Treasure.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of how I learned about it.
Right. Yeah, so like
Yeah.
like Freemasonry, like okay, so the Mason lodges, because there's one in every city.
Yeah.
And it's a massive organization. But it's also like there's not like a representative from the Masons showing up at wherever.
Yeah.
Like whatever they are doing, you don't know about it.
True.
And even their lodges are like, there's like a door, and then if it's like a multiple story building, there's like no windows.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is always the weirdest thing to me, because it's like, okay, the Masons are known for like geometry and building things, and being master craftsmen and builders.
Yeah.
But their buildings seem abandoned, which is like, what is that?
What's that about?
What is that about? Yeah. So like, okay, so there is something that's kind of interesting when it comes to this particular topic, and there's a few things that I know that I'll probably have you pull up, but like, again, it's like a splatter of like where do we go?
Where
with
do we
this?
go with it? Yeah.
But okay, so there are competing ideals, and there are also these massive things that are happening across the board. So let me start here. I feel like the premise of the podcast in general is to go back to like that is an interesting question, that if you have some interaction with a lodge or with somebody, a family member who's a Freemason, it might bring up some conversations where you might bring it into a church and ask a pastor, what about this? So there is something that I do know, is that the if you are Catholic,
Yeah.
the Catholic Church actually forbids you from being a Freemason.
Yeah.
So like that's something that's kind of interesting. And when we were talking about maybe talking about this, I actually sent you that. Can you pull that up, because it's kind of interesting. But yeah, so the Catholic Church itself, within their instruction, they have this document that is part of like what they can and can't do. So it says like,
And this is from the Vatican.
this is directly from the Vatican, the titular Archbishop of Lorium, secretary. Yeah, so this is like an official document, Vatican document, and it's a Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, it's a declaration on Messianic associations. So I feel like this was like a interesting place to start in this conversation, because it's like, okay, Nimrod, Freemasons, we'll get there, but what does maybe the church historically say about Freemasonry?
Yeah, good point.
Because I feel like there are people that have had interactions with Freemasons,
Yeah.
but for the most part, it's like I'm saying, it's like you see a building, you know about a lodge, and for the most part, like Freemasons' tenets are like truth and to like help people.
Yeah.
And so they traditionally have been good for society on the surface.
Yeah, because a lot of philanthropic work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so this is Declaration of Messianic Associations. It has been asked whether there has been any change in the church's decision in regard to Messianic associations, since the new code of canon law does not mention them expressly, unlike the previous code. So what they're talking about there is like updated like Vatican II stuff. Like, again, we should do an episode on Catholicism.
That could be an episode.
That could be an episode. But yeah, they update things for like the Catholic Church itself has all of these things built in that councils talk about extensively in research and have for thousands of years at this point, which is pretty cool. It's pretty unique and centralizes everything to where like if you have a question about something specific, they probably have an answer for it, and it's probably in a document like this.
Yeah.
Where it's like, all right, so this sacred congregation is in a position to reply that this circumstance is due to an editorial criterion which was followed also in the case of other associations, likewise unmentioned, inasmuch as they are contained in wider categories. So what they're about to say about the Masons it also is in regard to other organizations like this. Therefore, the church's negative judgment in regard to Messianic association remains unchanged, since their principles have always been considered irreconcilable with the doctrine of the church, and therefore membership in them remains forbidden.
Holy moly.
The faithful who enroll in Messianic associations are in a state of grave sin and may not receive Holy Communion.
So it's a pretty strong stand.
It's wild.
And the fact they say it remains unchanged, it's like they've felt that way for a very long time. It's not like a new idea. They're like, let's just reaffirm this is our stance.
Right. And this statement is from Rome, from the Office of the Sacred Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, November 26, 1983.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask. So I mean, within the last 40 years, it's pretty recent for the Vatican.
Yeah, and the reason I knew about this was because I had heard somebody talk about the fact that Pope Francis, current pope, reaffirmed this stance.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and had made a statement on it recently.
Oh, so he's like, let's re-up this.
Yeah.
Wow.
So like apparently a lot of like this has been consistent for a pretty decent amount of time.
Interesting.
But the interesting thing about it to me is how straightforward it is, that the church's negative judgment in regard to Messianic association remains unchanged, since their principles, the Messianic principles, have always been considered irreconcilable with the doctrine of the church, and therefore membership in them remains forbidden. So it's not just like a lodge where people hang out.
They're like, no, there's stuff going on here, and you're not supposed to be a part of it.
So much so that the differences
communion
in what but like it's irreconcilable.
Yeah.
Like what their practices and what they believe as part of Freemasonry has irreconcilable differences with the faith, the Christian faith.
Yeah. I mean, which it's like it makes you ask. It's like, okay, so what's going on over there?
Yeah. What is going on over there? So like let's then jump around a little bit.
Yeah.
So then okay, so if we go, all right, well, what is going on over there? Here's your phone.
Oh, thanks.
If we go, what is going on over there? I don't have all those answers. Let me just say that right away.
To be fair, I don't think anyone does, because they are a secret society as well,
Yeah.
which I know is kind of a buzzword term to use, but that's how they classify themselves.
Yeah.
They're an exclusive group.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll say it that way.
Yeah. Which is, it's fine to be an exclusive group,
Yeah.
but if the organization of the Catholic Church has a statement through the Vatican that's been re-upped by modern popes that says you can't be a Catholic and a Freemason, and if you are a Freemason, you cannot receive Holy Communion because there's irreconcilable differences in the practice and belief of Freemasonry and the Catholic Church.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and the reason why, like I'm not Catholic, as far as I know, Paul, you're not Catholic.
Not that I'm aware of either.
But like, and we've talked about this a little bit, but like the Catholic Church the Catholic Church held Christianity together for a long time. And they would argue that, I think there's a lot, I don't know if this is like from Rome, but I think there's kind of a core belief that the Catholic Church is the only true church, which that's another episode.
That should be a shirt.
But the thing that I do know is all of our scripture and all of our text was maintained there.
Yeah.
And came through that process of them handling that as well as possible and maintaining that. So the truth is like we are an offshoot.
Yeah.
Like Protestantism is an offshoot of Catholicism.
Yeah. I mean, that's Martin Luther, where he was like, hey, I got some issues with this.
Yeah.
And then people followed him.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that being said, it's an official stance of trusted organization in some ways when it comes to holding to simple Christian doctrine.
Yeah.
Now, there's a lot of other Christian doctrine that I don't particularly agree with, which is why I'm not Catholic.
Yeah.
But the core doctrine is essentially the same.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why, like, to go to that, it's like, I mean, there's no, like, John Wesley didn't write something, as far as I'm aware of, that, and please, if you know if he did, put it in the comment, because I want to read that, about Freemasonry. But you have all these, like, secret, like that, the secret society element of it. And Freemasons also, I'm going to try and keep this as, like, simple as I can.
Yeah.
But so Freemasons would have, how do I say this? Without bringing in a bunch of other things.
Can I say,
yeah, help me out here,
for
Paul.
ourselves too? It's like, I think it's tough with a conversation like this, and some of the one we had, it's like, because we try to stay as grounded as we can, and like, okay, what can we actually like? Not say to not get in trouble with anything, but it's like, all right, how do we make this a reasonable thing to say? Yeah, because especially with Freemasonry, it's difficult because there's a lot of things that people say.
Yeah,
and then it's like, okay, but what is the reality? What are things you can actually show and be like, this is what it is?
Yeah, and to be honest, I don't know that we should answer that question.
I don't think we can right now.
Yeah,
or I don't think we should right now.
So I think we play with, like, we'll just kind of play with the things we do know. Yeah. Which is exactly what you're saying.
Well, and I think the place to start, which is kind of where you're going here, I think, is like, okay, so we know we have a statement that's been reaffirmed many times by the Vatican.
Yes.
That says Christianity and Freemasonry cannot mix.
Yes.
So it's like, okay, so there's something we can hang on to at least.
Yeah. And, okay, so let's go that direction. So what is Freemasonry, or what is Messianic tradition? Messianic?
I think it's Masonic.
Yeah, I should say. That's why I paused, because the E sound goes a different direction. Yeah. But yeah, so that particular tradition has a process, or it has a tradition that goes back in a very specific way.
Yeah.
And I feel like maybe the whole thing is like we just read the statements.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
So the Catholic Church says you can't be a Christian and a Freemason at the same time. So that gives us a little bit of insight of being a Freemason. It doesn't really tell us much about Freemasonry.
Yeah.
Now, we can look at things like there is the speculative side of things that is fun to get into. And one of the things that I'll just tell you right now is at some point, this whole segment of our podcast will be us playing around with an idea. But we'll be very clear to let you know all
when
the
we're
way
doing
through.
that.
Yeah. Not necessarily specifically conspiratorial, but just like playing around with fun ideas of what something could be.
But I think it is important. I think this is what we're doing now, or this is what we are doing, is like, let's set a groundwork and a framework to place in. So it's like, here are our boundaries. Now we can have some fun in the sand.
Yeah, so then let me jump to this. So we know what
Yeah.
the Catholic Church has said about Freemasonry and the relationship between the Christian faith. So let me jump to Nimrod, and in relationship to a statement that the Freemasons make about themselves. So I sent that to you as well.
Yeah.
So like that was this is another thing that like, all right, so this is what the Catholic Church says, and then the Freemasons actually reference Nimrod. So the Freemasons actually reference Nimrod, and it's interesting because
isn't some of their older writings
that
that they have written, the Freemasons have written.
So it says Hiram, the architect of Solomon's temple, is one of the most famous Masons. So yeah, you're right. And it says, an Oriental legend traces the lineage of Hiram from Adam through Tubal-Cain and Nimrod, the builder of the Tower of Babel. On Nimrod being a Mason, well, that's pretty straightforward. I think that answers the question.
I think we just answered. Is this the first time we've answered a question?
Maybe. This directly. And maybe that's what it's building up to. Like, we're like, that's why we're stuttering a little bit. It's like, let's try not to
spoil it.
Or no, like let's try not to jump around to all the things we want to jump around to.
Yeah.
And just answer the question.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
So on Nimrod being a Mason, this is a quote. Every reading Mason, so any Mason that can read, is aware that from the time of the original of the Cook MS constitutions, AD 1400. So that's
pretty old.
Yeah. Referencing back to the 1400s. It has been handed down that the hunter king Nimrod was a grand master. So that statement says that Nimrod himself, the hunter king, was a grand master. And a grand master is the highest level of Freemasonry.
Yeah.
And like, one thing I do know is like, and I think most people watching this or listening probably know this as well, Freemasonry has a bunch of different levels.
Mm-hmm.
So like, we do know that like you come in and you're at level 1. That's kind of how Scientology is too, right?
Yeah, but I think, don't you have to just donate money for that?
Yeah.
I actually have no clue how it works.
You buy access.
Yeah.
Probably. But it's level 1, and then the highest level is level 33.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, we don't. That's all that we like potentially know.
That's all I can say.
I'm not a Mason. I don't really even. I haven't really known a Mason either, and that's the thing. But, so they say that the document from the Masons' Constitution, dating back to 1400 AD, is that Hunter King Nimrod was a Grand Master. For some hundreds of years, our constitutions have asserted that Nimrod was a Grand Master and gave the Masons a charge which we still follow. That's pretty scary.
Yeah.
So the quote
That
there
is
is,
scary.
for some hundreds of years, our constitutions have asserted that Nimrod was a Grand Master, and Nimrod, as a Grand Master, gave the Masons a charge, so a call to action, which we still follow.
That's crazy.
So within Masonry, there's a charge or a call to action
given from Nimrod.
given from Nimrod that's in their constitution. And our oldest Messianic manuscript traces Masonry not to Solomon, but to Nimrod and Euclid
Mm-hmm.
in a still earlier time. The oldest known Messianic text, the Old Charges, which dates at least as far back as 1400, sets out a legendary heritage that begins with the antediluvian patriarch Jabal, who discovered geometry and wrote down his findings on pillars of stone. After Noah's flood destroyed all human civilization, the Egyptian sage Hermes rediscovered this knowledge and passed it on in a lineage that includes Nimrod. So
that's interesting.
Yeah. So what they're saying is like in the Messianic tradition and in their constitutions, basically, an antediluvian is like, I love that word.
It's a cool sounding word.
Yeah, it just means before the flood.
Yeah.
So it's just referring to the time before the flood, the Noahic flood.
Yeah.
But so so the patriarch Jabal, however you want to say it, he discovered geometry and wrote it down, his findings on pillars of stone. So they dated all the way back to that as like part of the origin of Masonry that's in the antediluvian pre-flood.
That's crazy.
Which would mean that post-flood, and this is kind of where like I started to look at this, like how does this lay out? Because I heard someone say that the Masons consider Nimrod the first Mason post-flood.
Which, with that writing, makes sense.
It also, that language also correlates to what they call Nimrod in the Bible.
Yeah.
That he's the first mighty man.
Yeah.
Like, that's the thing that throws me off a little bit about...
That's interesting.
Yeah, can you pull up Genesis 10? Because that's the thing that throws me off a little bit about Genesis 10 is like in the genealogy of the nations, as it's laying it out, it's weird to me that all of a sudden it just says, in referring to him, he was a mighty hunter before the Lord, which that language the Masons used.
Yeah.
Therefore, it is said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. The beginning of his kingdom was Babel. I'm jumping ahead. Cush fathered Nimrod. He was the first on earth to be a mighty man, which is pretty interesting. And then, of course, that's the drop-down translation is like he began to be a mighty man on the earth.
Yeah. And
that's where like some translations diverge, where in the sense that like this reads, the ESV reads, he was the first on earth to be a mighty man. But then it refers back to the Hebrew layout that potentially said he began.
Yeah.
He began to be a mighty man.
Which means like he wasn't for a time.
Right.
Yeah.
And then he became a Gibborim.
Yeah.
Which, do you want to talk about that?
If you want to.
Yeah.
Well, so
I mean, just explaining what a Gibborim is in the tradition itself.
Yeah, so I mean, in the simplest thing, the first time that we see that is in Genesis 6, where it refers to the mighty men of old, the men of renown.
Right.
The mighty men being Gibborim.
Which would be the antediluvian that we're talking about.
Yes. And then so here we see it singular, so just Gibor.
Yeah. Yeah, which is, so that's interesting in relationship to the Messianic tradition.
Yeah.
That Nimrod would have been the first to carry that tradition.
Yeah.
Through post-flood.
Yeah.
Or at least, actually what I read there wasn't that he wasn't the first one, but instead he was in the tradition of post-flood.
Yeah. Which I guess if you're following with what the Freemasons wrote,
yeah,
is that, well, yes, there was the the people that discovered geometry,
Right.
and they wrote down their practice and their understanding, and he picked that up.
But go back to that. So
Yeah.
like that's kind of what I wanted to go back to, because even with Nimrod, like it's interesting if Nimrod was a Freemason, particularly
Yeah.
a Grand Master.
Yeah.
Now there's a good chance that he wasn't a Mason,
Right.
but instead in the tradition, in the charge of Nimrod,
Yeah.
whatever Nimrod was carrying on and whatever it was called back then eventually becomes Freemasonry.
We end up calling it Freemasonry.
Yeah. Or it's an offshoot of whatever the
Mm.
byproduct of that was. Or like in the tradition of, which makes me think that like if they are master builders, then the idea of like, then what are they building?
Right.
Because to be completely honest, like Masons, what they build is not that. It's not that it's not that interesting. It's just their particular buildings
Yeah.
look like they're only hiding things.
Right.
So then what are they building that we can't see?
But
That was the end. Why I wanted to go back to that. Why I wanted to go back to that is because they reference Jabel, who learned geometry.
Yeah.
What do you mean he learned geometry?
That's a good question.
So that's why I wanted you to mention Gibor, because if you go like, all right, well, so Masonry is based on geometry, and that guy learned geometry, and he wrote it on a stone pillar.
Yeah.
And then Masons picked that up and used the geometry that was written on that stone pillar in their tradition in order to build things.
Yeah.
Including things like the monolithic structure that was King Solomon's temple.
Yeah.
In that tradition.
Yeah.
So what was that tradition and where did that come from? And that does take us back to the what you almost said instead of Nimrod, which would be Enoch.
Yeah, it sure would.
Because
that Freudian slip there.
because that is like that would be the tradition of Enoch 1.
Yeah.
Which would be when the sons of God came down and they lay with the daughters of man. That Enoch picks that story up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And basically says, in exchange for knowledge. So
yeah,
there's knowledge given to the men of the earth.
Mm-hmm.
And when that knowledge is given, it's given the knowledge that's given are things like geometry.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like, okay, well, where did geometry come from? Well, if you trace the dots back, you can look at Enoch 1 that then is corroborated that the event itself happened, but not necessarily in the detail of Enoch 1 to Genesis 6.
Yeah.
In the scriptures.
Yeah.
That basically says, well, geometry was given to man through the sons of God, and it was knowledge that was passed down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which is
kind of wild.
It's wild because it means that like the tradition of Nimrod that becomes Masonry is knowledge passed down from an angel cast out of heaven.
Yeah.
So it's knowledge that we should not have had.
Yeah.
Or, I'm not really sure how to unpack that fully.
Yeah. Well, I think before we maybe go into that, I kind of want to tie some of this in.
We should probably wrap it all together because...
Yeah. Well, so I kind of want to do it this way because I was kind of planning for this conversation a little bit.
Okay.
Just in case. Because I was like, I think this is a cool conversation. It's like, I don't want to lose the people that aren't fully with us yet.
Okay.
Or if you are with us, maybe you don't know this and it could be fun. And warning too, just on the front, this is a little bit more PG-13.
Okay.
Nothing crazy. I'm gonna try to be delicate with it if I can.
Let's be delicate.
So I think one question that some people might ask, for those who don't know, is like, who's Nimrod?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, so we're saying like, yeah, this is bad that the Freemasons are tying themselves to him. some people are like, okay, but why is it so bad?
Right.
It's like, okay, well, Tower of Babel, pretty bad, first of all.
Yeah.
It's pretty clear that he's in opposition to the Lord.
Yeah.
So that right there, let's take that. But also, I want to go back to Noah first.
Okay.
And so Noah, we see that he was saved, him and his 3 sons and their wives.
Yes.
And Noah's wife as well. She's important to this story.
Yeah.
They were found to be the only righteous ones.
Yes.
And they were saved from the flood.
Right.
God saved them and preserved them.
Yeah.
Well, we have the story after the flood where they're all blessed. And then Noah's like, nice, I'm going to make a vineyard.
Yeah.
He presses some wine. He gets a little past the tipsy point. And he passes out.
Yes.
And we see in this story, the way it's written is that Ham, one of his 3 sons, walks in and sees or uncovers his father's nakedness.
Yeah.
And afterwards, he goes then and tells his brothers about it.
Right.
And so, like, what's interesting with this, let me go ahead and just read it, because the phrasing of this is really fascinating, and I think it's very important. So this is Genesis 9, starting in verse 20. Now Noah began to be a man of the soil, and he planted a vineyard. He drank of the wine and became drunk, and lay uncovered in his tent. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father, and told his 2 brothers outside. Then Shem and Japheth took a garment, laid it on both their shoulders, and walked backward, and covered the nakedness of their father. Their faces were turned backward, and they did not see their father's nakedness. When Noah woke from his wine, and knew what his youngest son had done to him, he said, Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be to his brothers. And we'll just go ahead and stop there. So what's interesting with this, first off, is so Ham does something bad.
Yeah.
And then Canaan gets cursed for it.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of different things. But so if we take it at face value, it looks like Ham goes in and sees that his dad's not wearing any clothes, maybe laughs at him, and then goes and makes fun of him to his brothers.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, but then he gets cursed? Like his son gets cursed? That's kind of weird.
Yeah.
So with that, I kind of want to jump to, I don't kind of want to, we're going to, to Numbers 13. No, sorry, not Numbers 13. What do I have it written down here? Leviticus 20:11.
There you go.
That's the one. And it says, if a man lies with his father's wife, he has uncovered his father's nakedness. Both of them shall surely be put to death. Their blood is upon them. And so we see it's like very similar language.
Yeah.
And so what it's kind of exposing to us here is that he didn't just see his father without any clothes. He actually slept with his mom.
Yeah.
And then he went and told his brothers about it.
So, okay.
And so here's what's interesting, though, because then it still begs the question. That alone is like, that's kind of crazy.
It is, especially as a modern reader.
Yeah. We're not taught to read it that way.
Well,
At least I wasn't.
well, the problem is Leviticus is pretty hard to get through.
Yeah.
Unless you're looking a lot deeper and you're seeing all the connections of things.
Yeah, true.
But you have to get through Leviticus to recognize what's happening in Genesis 9.
Yes.
Only as a modern reader.
Yeah.
But for who it was written,
They would know.
they would have known in Genesis 9.
Yes.
Because based on what you said out of Leviticus, or what you read out of Leviticus, it's one thing, like when you say the result,
Yeah.
or when you say basically the insult,
Mm-hmm.
it reflects the deed done.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
and instead of them telling you what the deed was, they told you the insult.
And they're like, you get it.
Yeah,
It's like the same as us using like a euphemism
exactly.
of like, oh, let's go hit the road.
Yes.
I'm not outside punching the street.
Right. Yes.
I'm getting in my car and driving away.
Yeah.
And that's what they're doing here.
Right.
But what's interesting to me is, and this is where it's like, this is kind of the fun part of studying the Bible, where it's like, let's look at, like, what's the weird stuff that jumps out here?
Yeah.
The first thing that I find interesting when I'm looking at this is first, when it's saying, we see Noah here who falls asleep in his drunkenness, and it says in verse 22, and Ham, the father of Canaan,
Right.
saw, and goes on. It's like, why'd you have to tell us he was the father of Canaan?
Yeah, I mean, that's...
It's kind of interesting. And then it's
Yeah.
like, and then why does Noah curse Canaan?
Right.
So there's one idea that I read, which I'm not, I guess I could kind of see, and it was that that jumps to the story of Balaam, where God says, you can't curse Israel because I have blessed them.
Mm.
And it's like, well, Noah's not going to curse Ham, who God has blessed earlier, post-flood. But with it being written that way and knowing what we know about it,
Yeah.
it seems to say that Canaan is actually a result of the deed Ham did,
Right.
or the misdeed, more likely.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, so Canaan is not a product of Ham's wife. It's a product of Ham and his mom.
Yes.
And because of that, Noah's like, now there's a curse.
Yeah.
And so what's also interesting with this, and we see, because you even said it earlier, it's like, this is the naming of nations,
Right.
is that, and that actually points back to Jacob and Esau,
Mm-hmm.
where we see the younger shall serve the older, even though the older is stronger.
Yeah.
It's like, well, we don't actually see that event play out in those two individuals' lives,
Mm-hmm.
but we see it in the result of the nations.
Yeah.
And
It's a generation to come. Yeah.
yeah, and I think that's what we see here. Noah is not cursing an individual baby, but he's
Right.
like, the nation that you will create, that curse will be upon you.
Yeah.
And so what's interesting is, so there's this huge misdeed that happens, a lot of bad things
Yeah.
with Ham in Ham's lineage, who then leads Ham to Cush to Nimrod. But then we see jumping all the way over to,
I love this.
it's fun, isn't it?
Yeah.
Let's see, I got a lot written down here. Numbers 13. That's where I wanted to go here
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. Okay.
And this is where the spies are sent into Canaan. Canaan, interesting.
Yeah. Well, wait, before you get there.
Okay, yeah.
So tying all of that together, it pulls back just the idea that, like, okay, if we look at Genesis and you go, man, there's just so much in the first 10 chapters, in the first 12 chapters, so much in the whole book of Genesis. But the truth is like, and the reason it's like when Moses is writing this down, as he's writing it and as it's being revealed to him, they already know the result of everything. So they're seeing
Yeah, true.
what the world looks like.
Yeah.
And through the revelation of Genesis, they're getting why it is the way it is.
Yeah.
So a
Yeah.
really easy way to look at that, and like a very simple way to look at that, is Genesis was not that complicated to the person hearing it, that revelation, because that's what their world was. It was a commentary to why and how their world got the way it is.
Yeah.
Our world is not like that now.
True.
It is
Yeah.
a downline of that. So like we have to kind of go back to what was their current view,
Yeah.
and then go
What are
to
the layers in here?
Yeah, and then now
Yeah.
let me go down line through the next couple thousand years or several thousand years to get to where I am now, and how all of that timeline reflect. That's why it's so hard for us to go back, because it's not like Genesis is not giving us all of that. It's telling the original listener,
Yeah.
this is why your world is the way it is.
Yeah. That's exactly it.
And then we have another layer, which
Mhm.
is we live thousands of years after that
Yeah.
person heard that for the first time.
Yeah.
So that's why it's like it almost is PG language
Yeah. Because
in
there's
that instance.
there's a lot happening here.
Yeah.
And it's, in some of it's pretty gruesome and it's a little gross.
Yeah.
But it's like, yeah, that's why they use the language that they use.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And showing the severity of what's going on.
Well, and it's not it shouldn't feel as crazy then when you get later to what you're about to read,
Yeah.
because it's like, well, yeah, I told you about it and
Mhm.
why it's happening,
Yeah.
or why it happened because of Genesis 9.
Yeah.
And then also like
Yeah.
Genesis 9 is happening because of Genesis 6 and
Mhm.
because of like it's all and because of
all these
Genesis
things tie
3,
together.
and it's all
Yeah.
the, and he's like going, this happened because of this, because of this, because of this,
Yeah.
and it all is
Yeah.
tied in, but it's a commentary. It's letting them know the origins. It's letting us know the origins.
Yeah.
Like context is everything. It should all
is.
tie together.
Yeah, and it does. And I
Yeah.
think that's so we see in Genesis 6, we see it talks about the giants, the
Right.
mighty men.
Yeah.
Well, now when we jump into Numbers, so we see kind of the origin of
It also says there that there were men
Yes.
of renown then and after,
the flood. Yeah.
which then we see Nimrod
Yeah.
was the first mighty man.
Yeah, he's associated with them.
Right. But
Yeah.
that's probably why it says he's the first,
Mm.
is because he's the first post-flood
Yeah.
that becomes a mighty man.
That's interesting.
Like the
And that would follow suit. Yeah.
right.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
But the men of renown would have come as a byproduct of a situation in Genesis 6
yeah.
between the sons of men, or the
daughters.
sons of God and the daughters of men.
Yes.
So how does Nimrod become that if he's already born? He had to be reborn in a different way. That is another podcast.
That is definitely another podcast. But so it's like it seems weird to, even when we tie into like the Masonic writing that we talked about, we mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
It's like, well, okay, how do all these things tie in?
Right.
Well, I think the thing that makes that connection for us is Numbers 13.
Okay.
In light of our reading of Genesis 9 and 10.
Yeah.
And it's where the spies are sent into Canaan, the Israelite spies, and they report that they saw giants. Now, these giants, as the text says, were the sons of Anak. Now, we don't see like that direct, like, son of them to son of him to son of him genealogical connection, but they were descendants of Canaan.
Right.
That's the nation that Noah cursed.
Yeah.
And so it's like what they're doing here is tying all of this together.
Mm-hmm.
And it's saying, like, here are these giants. They're associated with Canaan, who, you remember Canaan?
Yeah.
That was the product of Ham and his mother, Noah's wife.
Yeah.
And they're connected to Nimrod, who built the Tower of Babel, who is associated with the mighty men. And it's like, well, this is a really complicated web that's being presented here now.
Yeah, and it is all PG-13.
It is, yeah.
It's not PG, it's PG-13.
Didn't I say 13?
You did.
Okay.
But
I was like, I thought I said 13.
I think in the 80s it probably would have been rated R.
Oh, 100%.
Because the actual through line is what Paul says is the worst sin of all, is because you do it to your body.
Yeah.
And it's the through line of that practice of like sexual deviance.
Yeah.
Which is present in all of these situations.
Yeah, every situation where we see the association that's being made has to do with deviance.
Yeah. Which is that's kind of happening all the way through that.
Yeah.
Is like when there is human relations that isn't happening the way that God intended it to happen for them to be fruitful and multiply, what results is a byproduct of sin. Mm-hmm. And that result is cursed in the generation.
Yes.
And results in things that are bad for the nation itself.
Things that are not supposed to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's that, and that's the days of Noah.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's a great connecting point.
And I love doing that, especially because it's like, one, to show it's like, hey, this is scriptural.
Yeah.
We're not just pulling things like I think Enoch is a great resource
Yeah.
for us to use with these things,
Mm-hmm.
but showing it's like this is in Scripture too.
Yes.
Scripture does outline these things,
Yeah.
and that's why I think for us, like, we can have some amount of confidence in being like, oh, this is what Enoch is saying as well.
Yeah.
It's like because it's grounded within what is Scripture saying. How does it
Exactly.
outline it?
Exactly.
Yeah, and the fact that there is an outline there.
Yeah. Well, and it kind of there are things like that can kind of fill in gaps a little bit.
Yeah.
Because you also have things that are not as credible as something like
Oh,
Enoch
100%.
1,
Yeah.
which would be like, was it Book of Jasher?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which actually has
'Cause
more
they talk
content.
about Nimrod quite a bit in Jasher.
They do, yeah.
Yeah.
But that is the other weird thing is like with Nimrod, he's barely mentioned,
Yeah. Yeah.
but how he's mentioned is seemingly intentional to carry on a post-flood storyline.
Yeah.
That Nimrod is actually carrying on the and the days after.
Well, it goes
of
back
Genesis
to
6.
that charge that he's made that he's carrying on.
Yeah. And then that he charges,
Yeah.
according to the Masons,
Yeah.
that they carry on.
And I think that's that makes it scary to me
Absolutely.
when it's like, oh, okay, so that's who they're aligning themselves with, and we see who Nimrod is from, what his line is, what his focus is, his career path, if you will.
Yeah.
But then also, in some ways, the history that the Masons give about, pre-flood, he discovered geometry and wrote it down and blah, blah, blah. It's like, we don't have those details in Scripture.
No,
But that storyline kind of pans out.
it does.
And that's what's scary.
Yeah.
Because it's like, so there's a level of history here that kind of lines up with Scripture in enough ways that makes it kind of awful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if they're claiming to be of the tradition or the charge of Nimrod, then here's the other thing, and this is probably the last thing that I'll mention, because I feel like we're tying a nice bow right now.
Oh, nice.
But the interesting thing to me is that, like, the Tower of Babel, it's not about Nimrod.
Right.
It's a product of Nimrod.
Yeah.
So, like, that's the other thing is, like, Nimrod establishes these nations. I think it's like Assyria,
Yeah, Babel.
Nineveh.
Nineveh is a big one.
And so, like, there are these nations that Nimrod establishes. We don't necessarily have it that Nimrod is the one who builds the Tower of Babel. Because he's not in Genesis 11.
I think even in there is one of the writings that the Masons released in some of their old manuscripts, and it says I think he had 40,000 that they called Masons as well.
Oh, wild.
Yeah.
So he had master.
Actually, let me find
master builders. Well, and so, like, that's kind of what I'm saying is, like, the interesting thing to me about it is that Nimrod himself, what he was doing and, like, what he was about is not necessarily in Scripture, doesn't really have a ton to do with being a master builder.
Yeah, here it is.
Go ahead.
So it says, and the Cook MS thus repeats the story, and this same Nimrod began the Tower of Babylon, and he taught to his workmen the craft of masonry, and he had with him many masons, more than 40,000, and he loved and cherished them well.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that's their writings.
Yeah, and that and to make that clear, like, that's not like a like, that's from the Masons' writing.
Correct.
So we're learning that now.
Yeah. Yes.
And we're not saying that, like, that's true. We're just
saying that's what they say.
That's what they said, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's part of their constitution.
Correct.
So then that tradition is passed down from something. So that, again, that's what makes it kind of scary.
Yeah.
But I think it goes back to, like, I think that's the fascinating thing to me thinking about this is that he becomes a mighty man.
Yeah.
He becomes a Gibor
Yeah.
before the Tower of Babel.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't using the Tower of Babel to become a mighty man.
Right.
And I feel like that's how I always heard it framed,
Yeah.
that like he was trying to become a god.
But the way this is framed is like, no, he already became one.
Yeah, and then the nations that he built
Yeah.
towers to the gods,
Yeah.
but also like there's a whole other episode for the Tower of Babel.
Yeah. And I'll let me see if I can find this.
But that is one of the things that's interesting thing to me, because here's why. Because I think in general, and what hopefully this podcast exists to do, is to kind of take those things and go, hey, there's something bigger actually going on here.
Yeah.
Like you can't, like I feel like we just have to stop being in Sunday school or Bible studies or just in a casual conversation and being like, yeah, the Tower of Babel, yeah, they all spoke the same language and then they didn't. Yeah, so then like, yeah, after that, then you have Abraham. You're like, no, hang on.
We're going really quick here.
Hang on.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Everybody spoke the same language and then they just didn't? Why is that not a bigger, like, I feel like there's so many things that are like, wait, let's spend weeks on this.
Yeah.
What do you mean they all spoke the same language and then they didn't?
Yeah.
Like, what is that? So there's like a lot of things like that. And then you go, wait, what do you mean? And there's one sentence that says Nimrod then becomes a mighty man. He becomes what we've read 3 chapters before that was a big problem and a big reason why the flood happened. What do you mean that now he's like that quickly after?
Yeah.
All of a sudden, there's the byproduct of it again, which is downline of Ham and the issue that happened right after the flood stopped.
Yeah.
So like right after they get off the boat, like that within that generation, there's a sin that causes the same thing again.
Yeah, and repeats.
Yeah.
And so, well, here's what's interesting with that. And this goes back to Josephus.
Okay.
And so this was on his writings of Nimrod.
Okay.
And
Josephus is a historian.
He is. And so what he wrote on was...
He was Jewish, though,
Jewish
right?
texts and Jewish literature, as well as he used other older... actually, there are some Egyptian historians that Josephus uses and references that we have actually no record of today. We don't have any of their writings.
Oh, yeah, because Alexandria.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so all we have of them is what Josephus wrote on.
Right.
So he's an interesting character.
Yeah.
And so he has...
because he was a historian for Rome.
Yes. Yeah.
Or for the Romans. But I think... I don't know if he was Jewish by birth.
I don't know that offhand.
Yeah, but maybe... I think he was like a Jerusalem or a...
Okay.
An Israel-based Roman historian.
And that would make sense. Because I think... Yeah, I actually won't even go that path. But
yeah.
Well, so this is his description based on the information that he had through Jewish tradition and the literatures that he was referencing. He describes Nimrod as a bold man and of great strength of hand. He persuaded them, the people in his nation, not to ascribe it to God, as if it were through his means they were happy, but to believe that it was their own courage which procured that happiness. He continues by saying that Nimrod gradually shifted their government toward tyranny, turning them away from God and to depend on himself solely. He also turned his focus on opposing God directly by building a tower too high for the waters to be able to reach if God should decide to drown the world again.
Oh. So he's the first dictator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's what's interesting.
I like
with
that description of the Tower of Babel.
Yeah. And so to
outsmart God.
He's basically like, this is my revenge on God, because he's convinced the people that you don't need God to be happy.
Right. Enlightenment.
You are all that needs to be happy.
Yeah, that's
It's like, well,
classic
that's
enlightenment.
yeah. It's like that's not a new thought.
No.
We think that's new today. It's like that's been around since Nimrod.
Yeah.
And then he tries to turn everyone away from the Lord and says, no, we're gonna get our revenge on God, and because we're opposing him.
Right.
And if he decides to flood us again, we built this tower. He won't be able to touch us.
Yeah, that's wild.
And it's like that adds so much more context or ideas to the scene that Scripture outlines.
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, this is not good.
Yeah.
Like, to what you were saying earlier, it's like, let's get out of like oh, yep, cool. It's like, no, there's a lot happening here.
Yeah, a ton.
And it's like, this whole story blows up.
Yeah.
Like, it's severe what's going on. And the
For
fact
sure.
that God, in his mercy, all he did was confuse their language.
Yeah. What grace.
Well, also the faithfulness of God,
Yeah.
because he said, I'm not going to flood the earth again.
Right.
And he didn't.
Yeah, and and the main reason why he did, seemingly based on how that's laid out, it tells us that it happens again within a couple of chapters.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
once again, it goes back to that, like, hey, you know how the world is how it is? This is the origin of all that stuff. You can trace it all the way through this. Not only through these events, but through these people. And you can see why the Messiah has to come, but also has to come through the line of Seth and has to
Yeah.
avoid these people because of what they did.
Yeah.
And it has to come through this specific bloodline.
Mm.
So as we do that, it creates justification for what we are doing. Like, and when I say we, I'm saying Moses and the Israelites.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like what they are doing, what he's writing down is explaining why they are taking the actions they're taking.
Yeah.
Like God is telling us to do this, and here's why, written down in the
Yeah.
text.
Yeah.
Like these people are opposing us because this, and this happened. These
Mhm.
are their fathers who did these things.
Yeah.
That's why they're
Yeah.
opposing us.
And I think that's huge, because it's like, so the story in Scripture, it's bigger than a piece of fruit.
Yeah.
It's bigger than human beings. And I think it's a common thing that I found myself in, and sometimes I still do, and I think often as Christianity we can, is, all right, how is the Bible about me? What does it have to do for me?
Yeah.
And it's like, the more that that for me, when I study and I uncover these things and I find these connections here, these layers, it's like, no, it has nothing to do with me.
Yeah, and the more that
It's
that's
like,
the least
it's a-
interesting question.
Exactly. It's like, actually, I'm a pretty small player in here.
Yeah.
It doesn't diminish the fact that Jesus did what he did,
Right.
that God was faithful and merciful in his justice.
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, so I'm a pretty small player in this whole thing. There's a lot more than one decision one human made one time.
Yeah.
There's a lot more at stake here. But it all goes back to the fact of Yahweh God is in the process of redeeming his creation.
Right.
He's reordering what he ordered.
Yeah.
But his creation was like, let's make it chaos again.
Yeah.
He's like, no, I'm establishing order.
Right.
And that's the process. That's the story we see. And we see all the events that are happening in here that unfold in the layers of Genesis 1 through 10 alone.
Yeah.
And then further on throughout the rest of Scripture, that it just continues to reaffirm the mess that's being created.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like, yeah, so like geometry is not bad.
If you said it was, I wish I heard that. Like back in school. Teacher, I
Yeah.
can't learn this.
Yeah. So the charge of Nimrod going through the Messianic tradition and constitution has got to do a little bit more
Yeah.
about him being a dictator
Mm-hmm.
and the practices that he carried out than just his knowledge in geometry.
Yeah.
It has to, because otherwise, why would they be so secret about it?
Yeah. I mean, and we see through Josephus how he writes is, well, the charge that Nimrod gave to the people was, you don't need God,
Right.
you need yourself.
Yes. Which
And let's make fun of God.
yeah. Yeah, blaspheme.
Yeah.
So, going back to the Catholic Church statement, they are pretty adamantly against irreconcilable differences between beliefs, not just potential practices. So, I don't know about practices in Freemasonry. I've heard about things. Everything is speculation.
Yeah.
Just we don't know anything.
Yeah.
However, if even Josephus, who lived back first century, is writing about the charge to blaspheme God,
yeah,
then that is directly an irreconcilable difference
yeah,
between Masons and Christians.
absolutely.
So you can't be both.
Yeah.
But the real question is,
Yeah.
was Nimrod a Freemason? It turns out, what do they call it?
Yes.
Grand
Grand
Master.
Yeah.
Aw. Turns out that he was a Grand Master.
Yeah.
So, like, not only was he a Freemason,
He was a good one.
and apparently, according to Josephus, he had 40,000 men.
Yeah.
Well, that was Josephus, right?
Josephus wrote. Yeah. Oh, no. The Masons wrote that about him.
That's right.
Yeah.
So he had 40,000 great
Underlings.
Masons underneath him.
Yeah.
So he was,
He was working.
yeah, he's the grandest of
That
masters.
was before microphones.
Dude, I don't know.
That's why you need geometry, just so you can talk to everybody.
I know, at the
Use
same time.
angles. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fascinating to me. But yeah, so was Nimrod a Freemason? He was a Grand Master.
Yeah.
3, 2, 1.